I think one of the things that I've tried to do over the course of this is to often bring the discussion back to music and how music is constructed and how dramatic points are made musically, because I think that that's um, the hardest thing for most people to speak about when they're moved by music. I think they're often moved by the music, but it's easier to speak about what you see or the or words, because more of us live in those worlds. So I hope that's been helpful. But and of course that's how a work of art is constructed musically is very important to me. But I think that we, of course, this week has been so dramatic and so destructive. Who would have thought here that we have a work where a crowd is crying for vengeance and after an evil deed by someone in authority has been committed, and then a judgment is rendered, and then interestingly, of course, the victim asks for the victims, ask for mercy for the villain, which of course they are comfortably restored to um, the place as their rights as aristocrats. So it's magnanimous. They're being magnanimous, but of course. Um, their lives, their privileged lives, have been restored. But so I think that this opera, it's striking to be looking at it in the light of current events, and in many ways it speaks for itself. And I know that so many of you have patiently heard me speak so much over the course of these 8 weeks that I'd like to keep my remarks brief and also and then allow you to ask some questions of Jason, and Jason to talk a little about the making of the film, and then as indicated, and if you've read in our email, we'd love to hear from you. If you could say who you are, how you know us, or where you are, and something that has meant something of importance to you about this series, or about how it relates to your own life listening and whatever. So with regard to the piece, I thought that I would mention, if you were here last week, that what are the most important moments in the Gaveau and the Beethoven to me. And Gaveau funnily kind of glosses over the moment where Florestan's chains are unlocked. And in fact, right afterwards, we hear the line from Marceline saying, "But where am I going to find my true Fidelio?" And that gets a laugh out of the audience, of course, after this serious moment where his chains are unlocked, and that moment is kind of lost. And Gaveau saves his moment for the Don Fernando with the text. I think it's something like, "Let us erase the memory of this awful day or these awful deeds by restoring justice and truth." And that line kind of sits with us for a moment before, as text, before we hear a very gracious melody. So the Beethoven, on the other hand, well, the Gaveau and the Beethoven have something similar in that they maintain the tension from the previous scenes through the beginning of the finale, and by having Florestan and Leonore feel the possibility of the threat of death, which interestingly is something which Beethoven abandoned in Fidelio. At this point in Fidelio, the action is resolved, and we pretty much know that they're going to be fine, and they know that they're going to be fine. And Beethoven, of course, his finale is through composed, and the moment, which is so long, so moving, so key, is when Leonore unlocks Florestan's chains. And we hear first from the soloists and then from the chorus behind the soloists, God, how things change in an instant. and you try us, but you do not forsake us. Um, and then, of course, there's that inspiring and celebratory end, which is celebrating Leonore's courage. Um, so um, that um, with that, I'd like to actually turn it over to Jason. Oriol, the director of both operas, could not be with us, and he's sort of camera shy, if you will. But Jason is not camera shy. He works with you behind the camera all the time. So, and so we're very glad to have him with us and to acknowledge that we are seeing things visually, not only through Oriol Thomas's eyes, but through Jason as he guides us. And I feel you made some very interesting choices in this last finale, and with so many people on stage, there were a lot of more choices to make than maybe previously. And I thought if you'd speak a moment about your own work and what's important to you. So Jason, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, it's true that I'm used to cameras, but not being in front of them. There are so many overwhelming qualities in the finale that are very challenging to capture and convey visually, because the music is so visceral. So in a sense, this is really an opportunity to do the necessary introductions to establish that Florestan and Leonora are uncertain about what the outcome is going to be, that there are now women in the chorus liberating their husbands, presumably, from this awful captivity. And then the drama that follows the freeing of the chains. But the music is so dramatic, and the opportunity for the chorus to interact with soloists intervening, that I was often tempted to just go wide and let it play out. And by the way, Oriol clearly had a philosophy, Ryan, I don't know if he discussed it with you, of letting the drama get carried by the music, and minimizing activity on the stage, at least in the foreground. So you have pretty much all this activity in the shadows. I'll put my hands down because it's probably a blur on Zoom. You have all this activity in the background, extremely dimly lit. So it's another world that's going on back there. And then we have our familiar characters in the front. So that created an interesting juxtaposition of the clarity of one-shots and group shots of the major characters, which now include Dom Fernando, and the huddled masses, so to speak, in the background. And while they may very well be aristocrats, we see them as prisoners, and we see them as freed prisoners, tasting the beauty of their relationships for the first time, possibly in 10 years. So visually, we have these almost figment-like characters in this dim light, and they're almost violently turning to the camera at times in objection to Don Fernando's pronouncement of how Pizarro will be treated for his crime, and of course of the liberal perspective, the generosity of Leonora and Florestan. But they have such a stake in in what's going on, having been in prison for so long. So they represent one world, and visually, they are like figments because of the lighting, and there's camera movement, there's pans. So the camera is starting here, going across the group, and that creates the motion that otherwise you don't really see on stage once things get settled. So there's that juxtaposition between camera movement, mostly of the freed prisoners, and the more static shots of the main characters in the foreground, where a whole other interpersonal dynamic is unfolding. That dynamic being the relationship of Leonora to what was presumed to be her future wife in a queer era, and of course the relationship of all the other characters. So it was great fun. I'll mention one other thing. I don't want to keep going on, but it's really kind of astonishing comparison to the Pierre Gaveau, how because there is so much spoken dialogue in the Gaveau, that so much is worked out before the music even kicks in, with almost like a hymn of praise for Leonora. But all of this is working out so slowly with the Beethoven, but you don't feel that it's slow because the tempo of the music is fast, and the action on a personal level is fast. So a real difference, a real difference.
It was interesting to me too that the two things, well, one things I knew, but one thing I didn't actually notice until I saw the film, even having been in front of them conducting for so long, how Auriol dealt with the relationship of Giacchino and Marceline at the end, because there, as I mentioned, there's a line which that Marceline has in the Gaveau actually too, and it's very clear, but you have to, he has to wrap that up without having verbal cues. That is, the director, Auriol, had to wrap it up with having verbal cues. So there was one point in the music when they start to say Preist and are celebratory to the end, when he has Marceline run into Giacchino's arms, and it's I think it's actually well motivated and wonderful gesture with the music. But the one I didn't see was that when she surreptitiously sees the purse on the ground and she picks it up and says, well, if this purse is going begging, I might as well be for me. And we're reminded, of course, of the class difference between her and Giacchino and the others, and her relationship to money, and it takes us echoes lots of things earlier in the work. So so it was a joy to be able to see some of that close up, when, of course, trying to negotiate the full orchestra and the full chorus and cast, I was not able to see everything on the stage, even as I was looking at it.
When we're in an audience looking at a staged performance, the eyes are wandering. They're picking out what seems interesting at the time. And after a while, they're looking at what else is going on there. They have time to examine. When you're looking at a screen and everything is minimized, is shrunken, I think it can get very static very quickly. So there are two main ways of generating movement or excitement, and picking out subject matter so that it expresses what the opera is there to express. And one way is simply camera angles. So that's, multiple cameras, and I believe we had 5 operated cameras and a couple of locked cameras. So they're changing. So none of this, of course, is left to chance. We have a script, we have a score, and so we know who's going to be saying what at any given moment. So there needs to be a camera there to get it. And that is the basics. That's just watching the bouncing ball. Okay, the action is here because this person is saying something here. Now this person is responding. That's just following the bouncing ball. But it's much more exciting to capture aspects of the interaction, to see, as we would see if we were present, other people on the stage reacting to what's going on. You see this in film. This is standard film language, a cutaway. Okay, so multiple cameras is one way of engaging the viewer and showing specific moments and singling out for their view something that's going on. The other is camera movement. And that is challenging when you just have 1 rehearsal and 2 performances, which is not an uncommon schedule, because camera movement takes rehearsing. It takes timing, it takes doing something very smoothly. It's like a camera operator becomes a musician. So you have a violinist, they've practiced the violin all their life, and they've studied a particular work that they are now going to perform. A camera operator can be an artist, and there is a very difficult shot that might begin here, might end here, but it needs to move in a way that conveys the spirit of the music and the timing. It needs to land on the person where you want to end up right at the right moment. So I'm happy that we have a combination of those 2 techniques to create focus and hopefully adequate visual interest.
And it's so wonderful to be able to do, on the one hand, this centerpiece of Western civilization, Beethoven, this masterpiece, Beethoven's Leonore, and at the same time realize that its genesis is so connected to popular art, and to be able to move freely between popular art and sophisticated art without pretense and without and naturally, I think is something which I see very important at this time, and which interests me personally. So I'm hoping that maybe our next set of online talks might be about include at least that subject, and I'm very happy that we've been able to start it with in such a devoted, well, you all have been so devoted in listening and coming each week, and I really appreciate the company, the companionship, the intellectual companionship, the audience, you being a part of Opera Lafayette in this way when we can't be together physically. And so I wanted to say thanks to everyone.
It's vital for the music, not industry, ecosystem, that Opera Lafayette exists and does present pieces like that, works like that, that is outside the regular path, outside of all we hear all the time, done by everybody. It's vital, it's important, and I'm very happy and proud to have been part of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimmy. Thank you, Kimmy. See, Kimmy, can I tell one private thing on you? Or you don't know what it is, so so you don't know. One of the interesting things about this is actually that that Kimmy, I asked Kimmy to do the Beethoven Leonore, and Kimmy worked very hard on it and said, I don't think this is for me. it's not the same. It asks something different. And um, the kind of honesty that you get from artists, particularly very fine artists who know themselves well, is just so appreciated from those of us who are conducting and contracting. And Kimmy, I think you're fabulous for having worked so hard and then come to the point where to say, I don't think it's for me. And
No,
so
but
I was
but
very,
it was a great deception for me not to be able to deliver, but I was not gonna let you down by imposing my
yeah.
incapacity of doing everything as it should have done and as Natalie did. So I'm very grateful for her to have taken over.
Yeah, she did. And of course, I remember you saying, she said, I don't know, we all have our little secrets.
Yes,
And as singers,
yes,
and you said, you said, you knew that Natalie had been a Marceline, but and we had done some heavier repertoire with her, but in fact she had her little secret that this was on her, at this point in her life was something that she could do, and that was great too. Yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, I'm proud to have done my part. And
Well,
I'm very
so brilliantly.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so happy to hear all the enthusiastic response from everybody, the board, the audience. It's very gratifying.
Well, thank you. Do we have do one of our other artists who would like to? You don't have to say such nice things as Kimmy said. You can say something else.
Okay, good. Then I'll say something then.
All right.
No, I just want to say it was a fantastic project and incredible music and incredibly challenging for the orchestra, right? I mean, it really, yeah, incredibly difficult, but I think, yeah.
There were some orchestra members who said, "I am so scared of this," and
Yeah.
So all right.
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's really, really incredibly hard, difficult music, right? If you, of course, if you see it from our eyes and ears now, it's not. But taken from what came before, it's incredible. So we heard the singers and saw you and listened to each other, so we had no idea what was going on stage. Going on the stage most of the time, but congratulations on the fact that it was such a huge success. So yeah, keep it up.
Thank you for being part of it, Charlie.
Sure, of course.